Welcome to this explainer. Look, today we're tackling something that taps straight into our most primal fears. We're going to explore some of the most baffling, literally impossible disappearances in underground history. I am absolutely fascinated by this topic because, it challenges that modern assumption we all have that the world is fully charted and understood. But as we're about to see, there are places right beneath our feet that completely refuse to give up their secrets. So let's dive right into this. I want you to just let this quote sit with you for a second. Underneath our feet are hundreds of miles of unmapped darkness where people enter and simply cease to exist. It's a genuinely haunting thought, isn't it? It perfectly captures that intense claustrophobia of unmapped underground labyrinths, because the second you leave the sunlight behind and step into the earth, you are entering a totally different, unforgiving world. To put the sheer scale of this into perspective, think about the number 400. That represents the more than 400 miles of mapped passages in Kentucky's Mammoth Cave, which is the longest cave system in the entire world. But here's the kicker. Scientists actually believe those 400 miles are just a fraction of the twisting underground darkness down there. There are hundreds of additional miles that remained completely unmapped. Back in the mid to late 1800s, there was this really stark contrast in how people experienced that massive cave. On one hand, you had the safe, guided routes. Tour guides would lead people around using nothing but candles and oil lanterns. But some adventurous folks, they weren't satisfied with that. They wandered off straight into the pitch-black, unmapped labyrinths. And without modern GPS or electric lights, getting lost was terrifyingly easy. Search parties basically had zero hope of finding anyone in a 400-mile maze. While some remains were found decades later, at least 3 individuals from the 1800s are still officially listed as missing persons today. They walked in a century ago and just never came out. Section 1. The Cave of the Skulls, a desert impossibility. That historical context brings us perfectly to our first major focus for this explainer. We're jumping forward to the 1960s in the American Southwest. A group of explorers heard local rumors about this totally unexplored desert system, known, rather chillingly, as the Cave of the Skulls. The exact location is actually debated. Some say it was California, others say Nevada, but they eventually found a hidden entrance deep in a rocky hillside, and they went in. As they're navigating the dark, they hit what's called a squeeze. In caving, a squeeze is exactly what it sounds like. It's a severely claustrophobic bottleneck where explorers physically have to drag themselves through solid rock with absolutely no idea what kind of chamber is on the other side. Well, one of the explorers decided he wanted to see where this particular squeeze led, so he left his friends behind in the main chamber. And this step-by-step breakdown brilliantly illustrates the sheer terror of what happened next. First, he crawls into that incredibly tight squeeze completely alone. Second, his friends wait. They figure he'll be back in a few minutes, right? But a whole hour passes. They call out into the darkness. Nothing. Dead silence. Third, panic sets in, and they decide they have to follow him, crawling one by one through that exact same terrifyingly tight tunnel. And finally, step 4. They emerge on the other side only to find a small chamber that ends in a solid wall of rock. There's no other way out. It is a total dead end. But their friend is gone. No body, no equipment, literally not a single trace. Naturally, the group gets out, completely panicked, and contacts the authorities. But the aftermath is where this case becomes truly impossible. When the search and rescue teams were dispatched, they couldn't even find the Cave of the Skulls. The actual entrance to the cave had vanished. Reports suggest that maybe shifting desert sands covered the opening, or perhaps a sudden landslide sealed the whole thing shut. Whatever happened, rescue teams could never relocate the exact spot. The man was never found, leaving his fate a permanent, deeply unsettling mystery. So, the crucial takeaway from the Cave of the Skulls is that unmapped, unstable desert caves are incredibly dangerous. Makes sense? But let's look at this comparison. We're shifting from an unmapped desert labyrinth to our next major focus, Vortex Spring. This is a heavily mapped underwater cave in Florida. You'd think a fully mapped, super popular location would totally eliminate the possibility of someone vanishing without a trace, right? Well, as we're going to see, that isn't true at all. Section 2. The Vortex Spring Mystery. The Case of Ben McDaniel. Guys, this is one of the most baffling mysteries in the history of cave diving. In 2010, Ben McDaniel arrived at Vortex Spring. And he wasn't a beginner. He was a fully certified diver who had visited this specific underwater system many, many times. He knew the passages and he knew the risks. Let's walk through the timeline for August 18th. Ben arrives at the dive shop. Two employees literally watch him gear up on the shore. They watch him get into the water with the scuba tanks. They watch him descend into the spring and swim directly toward the cave entrance. This was a highly witnessed event. But darkness falls, and Ben never comes back to the surface. The employees realize something is terribly wrong, and they call emergency services. What followed was just a massive, desperate search effort. Professional recovery divers, we're talking experts who knew every single inch of Vortex Spring, were brought in. They checked every known passage. They went as far as squeezing their bodies into crevices that are considered completely unswimmable, spaces so tight a human shouldn't even fit. And what did they find? Only Ben's decompression tank, just sitting right there at the cave entrance. Divers use those to safely return to the surface, which means Ben had to have gone deeper without it. But despite weeks of exhaustive searching, no other gear and no body was ever found. So how on earth do we explain this? Well, there are two main competing theories, and I want to present both impartially here because, honestly, both of them have massive logical holes. Theory 1. Ben got wedged in some hidden chamber deep in the cave. However, the professional divers who scoured the place insist that is physically impossible. They checked every conceivable space. Theory 2. Ben actually staged his own disappearance and somehow snuck out of the water. But that's highly unlikely given that eyewitnesses literally watched him descend and there was absolutely no trace of him exiting. I just want to pause right here to let this question really sink in. How does a diver vanish from a sealed, thoroughly searched underwater cave? He went in on camera with eyewitnesses into a mapped system and simply ceased to exist. His family has never gotten closure. It just defies all logic and physical reality. Section 3. The M Cave, a modern psychological mystery. So we've looked at the desert, we've looked at the water. Let's pull out to our final case today. This is a modern mystery from 2014, and it adds this deeply unsettling psychological layer to underground disappearances. A YouTuber named Kenny Veach, who went by Snakebite TV, claimed to have found a mysterious M-shaped cave out near Area 51 in Nevada. But he refused to go inside. He wrote, "My entire body began to vibrate with an intense, unexplainable energy. It felt wrong and dangerous. The feeling was so powerful, so terrifying that he just turned around and ran." Now, naturally, internet commenters were incredibly skeptical, right? They dared him to go back with a camera to prove it was real. Well, Kenny accepted that dare. After one totally unsuccessful filmed attempt to find it again, he set out completely alone for a short hike in November 2014, determined to find the M Cave one last time. He told his family he'd be back that same day. He never returned. Search and rescue teams scoured miles and miles of harsh desert, checking caves, rocky outcrops, everything. The only trace they ever found was his cell phone, lying abandoned near an old mine shaft. They searched the shaft thoroughly, nothing. No sign of Kenny. His body has never been recovered. Which brings us to the end of our explainer, and to this final lingering thought. Whether it's a vanished friend in a desert squeeze, a certified diver evaporating from a totally mapped Florida spring, or a hiker seeking out a vibrating cave near Area 51, these cases are a stark reminder that the Earth still holds secrets we just can't comprehend. What truly lies waiting in the unmapped darkness? Thank you for learning with me today, and I really hope this leaves you with plenty to ponder about the unknown depths right beneath our feet.